the first gate that you pass through with grief is an entrance into an ongoing conversation. And the words, the opening lines of the conversation of grief is this: everything in this world that you love, you'll lose one day.
Welcome back to another episode of Wealth Within Reach. I'm so excited to introduce to you one of my super close friends who's gonna bring so many nuggets, Dr. John Onwuchekwa. In this episode, we talk about some things that you may be missing that are signs that you may need to experience some more healing with your grief. And we also talk about actual tangible ways of what you can do today to begin processing your grief. Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So happy to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, I would love to introduce everyone to Dr. John Onwuchekwa. Like, put some respect on your name.
That's it, yeah.
You work real hard for that.
Real hard, long time.
Yes, so Dr. John is a former pastor. He's one of my closest best friends, esteemed author, husband, dad, what else? Coffee owner.
Yeah.
What all do you do? Master storyteller?
Lots of stuff.
Lots of different things.
No, I don't do lots of things.
Okay.
I do the same two things in a lot of different spaces.
Okay, talk to me about that.
I innovate.
Okay.
So I create ideas about what should be. And then I galvanize. So I build teams to recruit people and resources to do those things. So my whole life is, hey, I've got an idea.
Yeah.
I think I can get a bunch of people to agree that it is a good idea.
Yes.
And all right, let's set up this team, and then
y'all
things happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You stay in your lane, your zone of genius.
That's it.
I love it. Okay, so I love to start off the conversation asking a quick icebreaker.
Okay.
So when you were growing up,
When I was growing up.
Little Chim Didn't Do.
Little Chim
And Houston, well, outside of Houston, Sugarland, Texas.
Sugarland, Texas.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay. Not a lot of people know this.
Okay.
I wanted to be the star in a sitcom.
Really?
Oh my goodness. I wanted to be the star in a sitcom.
Okay, talk to me about your role in this sitcom that you wanted to be.
The star, right? So think like, it really didn't matter. Yeah. So think, my
Family Matters.
Brother and Me.
Okay.
Family Matters, Fresh Prince, Martin. Like, all I knew was that, I saw that, and it's, I think I got the personality.
Okay.
I would love to be a sitcom actor.
Okay.
Yep.
How's that going for you?
It's not. So by all of the things that you shared, I'm about as far away from that as I could be, but it's great because things don't usually go well for child actors.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I'm glad that it didn't work out.
This is very true.
Right.
Speaking of child actors. No, but so okay, today's topic of conversation.
Yeah.
We're talking about something that you have studied, like you are well-versed, you've written books about it. You have the We Go On tour, which focuses on it, and it's the topic of grief. So people could be here and they're thinking like, this is a real estate show. Why are we talking about grief, right? But I just one thing that you've taught me is that grief affects all of us.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna get into it today, but what got you interested?
What got me interested?
In actually studying.
Well, I was driving in the car one day and I thought.
Yeah, so what made you start really like talking and teaching on grief?
Yeah, April 14th, 2015, right? I think, it's funny, like when you have a worst day of your life, it's funny the things that you remember, right? So I remember April 14, 2015 was a Tuesday. I remember, I can still close my eyes and I can retrace the layout of the Longhorn Steakhouse in Orlando, Florida, right? I remember the way that it felt when my knees knocked together. I remember the unevenness of the pavement as my butt hit the concrete. I remember the way that people's faces so effortlessly twisted between horror and despair and disgust, as they looked at me screaming the words into my iPhone, he's dead?
Wow.
And it's I remember at that time just feeling empty, I didn't have anything. And the only thing I could hold on to was the anxiety that came from knowing that I would have to call and put my mom and my dad and my brothers and sisters and all the other unsuspecting bystanders in their sphere through that same trauma, right? So to just find out in an instant before you can protest or offer a prayer to God or ask for help that your brother, right, the closest familial relationship that you had was gone.
Yeah. And
it was I would say that at that point, my apprenticeship with sorrow started. And I was 30.
Wow.
And then 6 weeks later, we started the church in the West End.
Yeah.
And I felt that the way to get past it was,
do more.
Yeah, you just got to work, right?
Yeah.
And I remember over the course of the next 9 months, spending my time helping other people put their life together while mine was falling apart. And I found myself as a 31-year-old pastor cussing out a group of kids in a Lenox Mall parking lot.
Not cussing out the kids.
No, and what was more surprising than the fact that I cussed them out was how fluent I still was. I hadn't cussed anybody out in 15 years.
But it was there, it was still in you.
Yeah, I took 4 years of Spanish and I lost it quick. But I was stringing together phrases. And at that point, I'm I'm not okay.
Wow.
And so I call my wife, I call my friends at the time, and I say, yo, I'm not okay. And they say, oh, we know that you're not okay.
Wow.
We've just been waiting on you to say that you're not okay. And so it was at that point that I, took some extended time off work.
Yeah.
That it was just hey, helping other people put their lives together is actually an anesthesia that has numbed you to the fact that your life is falling apart.
Wow. Take
a step back. And it was at that time that it was that was when I really started to, process my grief, meeting with a grief counselor and a therapist and reading and starting to work.
Yeah.
And it was right as soon as I started to find the words, I didn't have any answers, but I was able to articulate my pain. And the more that I did that, the more that I connected with a group of folks that were just I felt the same way, but I never had the words.
Wow.
And that's when I saw, oh, wait a minute, this is a thing that touches everybody.
This is a universal language.
Oh, if humanity were a country, grief would be the official language of humanity.
Wow.
It is the one emotion that touches all of us.
Yeah. Birth and death.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because as you were describing the experience of how you felt, I thought about my biggest grief. I've had a lot of grief, but the biggest grief is when I lost my dad.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because I don't know if it's a Black person's thing, but I feel for a long time, he almost prepared us for when he wasn't going to be here.
Right.
So he would say things like, oh, there's going to be a day I'm not going to be here. And when I'm not here, and I'm like, who talks about that?
Right.
All the time. So I remember, if you know me, I'm always on D&D.
Yeah.
We have conversations about this.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I always knew that my dad would pass before my mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something in me. I just knew it.
Right.
So when I woke up that morning at like 5 a.m. and I checked my phone and I seen all these messages. I seen like people trying to get a hold of me, my aunts from Facebook and everything. And I just knew it. Before I even knew who it was, I knew it was my dad.
Yeah.
I just knew it.
Yeah.
And so even thinking about that experience of like feeling numb, like you just like roll out the bed and then I had to get on a plane. Worst plane ride ever.
Yeah.
Because he had a heart attack, but he was basically on life support. And so I had to travel there or whatever. And so it's just like your world just stops and you're just like moving, but not really.
Right.
Yeah. So that's hard.
Yeah.
That's like, even if you know it's coming, when it comes, however it comes, it's hard.
Yeah, there's no way to prepare for it, right? Grief is like, or the loss of life is like this. It's like being sent into the cold and the rain. And somebody says, you either get a coat or an umbrella. You can't have both.
Wow.
So it's like, if I have a umbrella, I can stop the rain.
Yeah.
But that grief is gonna chill my bones. Or if I have a coat, right? I can stop the chill.
Yeah.
But that rain is gonna make me. There is no way to block from it all. Yeah.
What was interesting? So what's interesting after we were talking through both of our stories, you started experiencing the effects of grief quickly.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about how like. I kind of like sometimes I live in this oblivious bubble, which is like a gift and a curse.
Right.
The gift is that I can really focus and like make things happen. The curse is that people be like, girl, what? Did you not know that she didn't want to be your friend? Like she stopped answering her text. Like what is happening? So I'm like, but she didn't say it. But for me, I didn't start experiencing grief, I feel like, deeply until last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this was like experience more and more grief. And so there's a delayed and there's this like instant grief or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember last year I was on a walk with you and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but something ain't right.
Yeah.
What were like some of the just signs besides you cussing somebody out? Like what were some of the other like things that were happening that let you know something wasn't right?
I remember like usually I'm an agreeable person, right? So people generally like me. Right. There's not many people in the world that don't like me. And the people that don't like me, there's usually something very wrong with them. Yeah.
Of course
right. I remember like one of the things was I was just on the wrong side of every door. I was kind of on this mission to remain unhappy where, Chandra would ask me, how are you doing? And I'd be like, stop meddling. You just want me to get back to normal.
Just agitated.
So, then she wouldn't ask me how I was. And it's like, so you don't care anymore? And it was just like that. Like from an ongoing standpoint, you think about like loss of motivation, right? So it was like, I enjoyed, people and get a chance to work out and all this. And you just start to find that I don't enjoy those things, that I went from being an extrovert to, I just want to stay inside of the house.
Isolating,
right? Most people miss this, but this like profound and abiding sense of guilt and shame. I remember any pleasure that I experienced in life, enjoying a good meal, right? Time with my wife, movies. I would feel guilty because I would know, but his wife and his kids aren't. And those things just stay with you and they mess with you. And then you start to see like, oh, wait a minute. This change isn't quarantined to just the loss of life and death as I think about time with my brother, but this actually spills over into every area of my life. So
talk to me about that more.
Yeah. This is like dust.
Yeah.
And it just gets into every room. And that is where you start to find out. And I think this was one of the biggest things that I learned is that as time went on, things didn't necessarily go away. They didn't change. And you just start to learn. And I mean, you've learned this. Like grief doesn't really have an expiration date.
I was going to say, so are you saying that time doesn't just heal all wounds?
Oh my goodness.
Because that's a very common kind of cliche thing.
It is. And it is as wrong as it is common, right? Time, so it's like this, right? Grief is actually much worse than folks think. Because like they would say time heals all wounds, but that is a lie. Time actually makes things worse, right? Do you know what comes after grief?
What?
More grief.
Yeah.
In different ways, right? So, 2 years to the date that my brother passed, my daughter, who was born premature, takes her first unassisted breath.
Wow.
And and it should be wow, and things are gonna be fixed, and there's supposed to be all of this joy.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you find is that it was at that point that I learned, grief makes everything in life more complicated. Because what I see now is like, when Sam was still here and I had experienced a joy in life, it was like there was a 3-part harmony of people celebrating. Once Sam passed, and those joys still came, the only thing that I heard was the absence of his voice. So even celebration has an asterisk next to it. And that's where you start to find that it's this, right? Grief doesn't have an expiration date, which means that sometimes it's often unhelpful to think of grief as a journey. Right? Because most journeys, they start and they end. And when it comes to grief, there is like, if you're trying to find a light at the end of the tunnel, there's no end of the tunnel, so it's not there. So I found that it's more helpful to think of grief not as a journey, but as a language. All right. The goal of a language is not to finish. The goal of a language is to become fluent. It's that as you start to talk, you connect with folks. So people turn on a podcast about real estate. They may have just lost somebody or something, and now they're leaning in. Why? Because we're speaking a language of grief. And the thing that you learn about languages is this: every language has multiple dialects. Dave Chappelle said Black people speak street talk and job interview, right? So we all
for
have
sure, 1000%.
But so with grief, there's this, right? There's tangible grief. That is the language that everybody speaks. It's this: I lost a loved one. Their body is put in a casket. It's dropped into the ground. Tears are sprinting down from my cheeks. People can connect my fallen tears to the fallen body. And I'm surrounded with hugs and handshakes.
It's evident. Right.
So that ambiguous grief is a dialect that a lot of people don't speak.
Talk to me about that.
Ambiguous grief is the death of a dream, the death of a relationship, the death of a friendship, a divorce.
Something that you never would have thought that you would have been going through.
The diagnosis of a parent with dementia. So take those two things. The people are still here. But when you talk about them with past tense verbs.
Wow.
Your body does not know the difference between that and a funeral. These are deaths with no funerals with no caskets. Your heart literally swells physiologically. Your body responds in the same way. And do you know what? When the tears are sprinting down your cheeks and they fall to the ground, and people do not have a casket or a funeral or a body to connect it to, at best, they question, why are you crying, right?
Yeah.
You've got all this.
Right.
At worst, they critique, because what we do often so poorly is we only legitimize somebody's grief if we can quantify it. Oh, this is a big loss. Or if we can compare it to somebody else's grief and it's worse, well, then you can cry. And it's no.
Right.
Ambiguous grief, once you start to talk there, then what you start to find is there's a lot of people that have said, oh, wait a minute, I haven't just been sad for 13 years in a row. I think I've actually been grieving.
Wow.
And then once you diagnose something, you realize that there are problems that aren't solved, not because of a lack of a cure, but because of the presence of a misdiagnosis.
Wow.
You cannot exercise your way out of grief.
Right.
You cannot achieve your way out of grief.
Right.
You can't eat your way out of grief, right? You can't sleep your way out of grief.
Yeah.
There's so much more that we have to work through.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think about so many things you just touched on, like so good. And I mean, both griefs are really, really difficult. Like you mentioned, it's just some of it is more hidden, you know?
Yeah.
So I think about, in like the real estate sector, I have clients who like, well, I thought that I was gonna like have this family and have these kids, and now, you know, I have a really successful career, and I've been wanting to invest, but I haven't, and so I'm just gonna do it now. I remember I have a mentorship program, and we were on a call, very first call. Now, you may know her, but anyways, we were on the very, very first call, and we were talking about like, you know, why are you interested in real estate? What brings you here? And she said, this woman, she said, you know what? I've been wanting to invest in real estate for years. I had this dream of doing it, and I found out I had cancer. This was first call. Nobody knew each other. I found out I had cancer, and all of a sudden, I just realized that I'm no longer gonna like wait. I am going to push through, and I am going to start today. And so I'm just thinking about like the grief that she felt having these two young boys, having this dream that she put off on hold. And I mean, we were just bawling on the first call. And so this is why I wanted to talk about this, because I don't hear any other real estate influencer talking about like what happens behind the scenes while we're trying to make all these moves.
Right.
Because life doesn't just pause and say, oh, I'm gonna stop lifing because you have this dream that you want to pursue. I'm gonna like not have marriage problems. We're not gonna your parents aren't gonna die. We're not gonna deal with cancer, infertility. We're not gonna deal with any of that. So you can pursue your dream of being a real estate investor.
No. Life actually waits until you're on the cusp of the most important things. And then it says, let's make things interesting.
Yes.
Right. And it throws.
Yes.
It just kind of hurls like death, despair, and grief all in the mix of it.
It's crazy. And so like, I just thought that this conversation was so necessary. And that's actually what makes our community, the Owning and Living community, is so like different, is because we speak to the whole entire person, because we don't want you to leave that part of you at the door. Because even specifically when it comes to Black people in America, I think, I'm not a scholar like you, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there's like a generational grief that we as a community have experienced that we haven't quite yet dealt with. Is that something that you
So it's grief is not just a language, right? One of the things that you learn about language acquisition is that, 55% of communication is non-verbal, right? So grief is very much a body language.
Yes.
We keep it inside, right?
Yeah.
But it's so often I think when we're trying to pinpoint somebody's grief or their heartache, we ask them, what are you feeling? But instead we should ask, where are you feeling?
Oh, wow.
My shoulders are tense all the time. My back hurts. And we tend to think like those are physical problems, but we are integrated beings, mind, body, and soul, right? Terror that exists in your soul is going to come out through tense shoulders and tingling, like, thumbs and chronic, pains.
Right.
And I do think there's an aspect of just knowing our history that helps us see, oh, wait a minute, we've actually, we've not been set up well to deal with the things.
This is why
that come
this
up.
wealth gap exists.
Right.
A big part of like what I do is to help, decrease that wealth gap. Right now, only 8% real estate investors are Black. Last time I checked, maybe 12 to 15% are Hispanic. And then if you shrink that down to the gender, it's probably even more crazy, right? And so I just think about, we read the same book, The Color of Money.
Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap.
Yes. And to hear these stories over and over again, starting from Reconstruction, I mean, like literally, I think about like June 19th, 1865, my people in Texas, right?
Yeah.
I actually have access to a newspaper article of my fourth great-grandfather who was on the plantation. He was like in his elderly years. He was a pastor. He preached a sermon on June 19th, 1865 for the newly freed Black people.
Wow.
And he expressed in the newspaper article, he expressed his deep concern just because literally it's like you're free and then you have nothing. You just like are supposed to just go.
Right.
And then within that, 10 to 15 years of Reconstruction, we actually gain wealth to just lose it.
Yeah. Well, not lose it, for it to be stolen. And these are the things where people need to know facts and data. Right. Yes. All right. So slaves have had their labor exploited for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Now they are finally able to participate in capital, right? The way that things work. So what they're told is like, the quickest way to build wealth, which we know, is to own land.
Yes.
And so they say, all right, go to work being paid less than your white counterparts in industries that are more humiliating than them, but go to work really, really hard, save money, put it into a bank so that one day you can have enough money saved into a bank so that you could buy a home.
Yeah, you can get a loan.
Yeah. So they created the Freedmen's Bureau or the Freedmen's Bank. And what it was a bank that was designed for Black people. Yep. So you would walk in and there would be Black people, tellers all at the front, and people would walk in with a sense of pride. It's like, this is ours. Yes. It was not, right? Black people was at the front. Yes. But they did not control where the money went. And a bank is not a piggy bank. Right. The goal of a bank is we hold your money. Right. We invest your money to make more money so that we can loan you money to buy a bank. So what they did was they convinced all these Black folks, do not gamble your wealth away. Yep. Invest it in this bank so that you can buy out. Yep. Well, the bank took all of their money and the people that owned it gambled on the railroads. The railroad burst, half of Black wealth.
Vanderbilt.
Half of Black wealth was gone in an instant. Wow. Everybody knew exactly who did it. And all Black people got was a condolence card that said, sorry for your loss. Wow. And to this day, you wonder why your grandparents do not trust banks. Yeah. And what do they do with their money? They put it under the mattress. It's for a reason. It's for a reason, y'all. Right. Yeah. So it's like, But those things, they affect us, right? They shape us. And and we could just go on and on and on and talk about all those things.
So we have both this generational grief, and we also have this, this grief that we have that has affected us directly in various ways that we're all going to experience. You and I both talk about a really key piece, and that we've been able to, a privilege that we've been able to take advantage of that has helped us to heal and deal with this. And that's what margin, right? You talked about that. So in your former job as a pastor, former job as a pastor, you helped lots of families in different situations, right? And so talk to me about, not a specific situation, but just different situations of, like, if people encounter grief, they don't have financial options, like what does that look like for them? How does the process look like for them versus a person who may be able to have some financial options that can take a break and deal with the things they're going through? Let me tell you about my upcoming event. Trust me when I tell you, you're gonna want to hear this. It's time to step into a world beyond your typical real estate conference. Imagine walking into the room and you instantly find your people. I would like to introduce you to the Owning It and Living It experience. This is a 3-day unique experience that merges Black and brown culture with real estate insights to help you think about building wealth in a different kind of way. This isn't just about making money, although we know how to do that. This is also about welcoming you into an environment where you feel seen, known, and safe. Join me for an unparalleled experience designed to help you both financially and empower you through the power of real estate. The Owning It and Living It experience is November 1st through 3rd at the Intercontinental Hotel in Atlanta. Yes, sis, we're in Buckhead. To learn more, go to owningitandlivingit.com or scroll down in the show notes, and I'll see you there.
The best picture that I had, and I forget what comedian said it. He's like, there's nothing like seeing an old person fall. That they fall very slow, but as they fall slow, it's like you can see, oh, this is gonna do major damage and it's slow and there's not anything that we can do to stop it. That's what it's like. It's people that don't have the financial margin or the communal and relational wealth to help them in it. You just see this like avalanche that cascades and snowballs and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if I don't have the means to be able to pay for the funeral and the caskets, these are things that nobody wants to plan for. But when you're actually up against it, you start to find out those pine boxes are expensive.
They are not cheap.
At
all.
So the whole thing is expensive, and you have to make major financial decisions quickly, very, very quick.
When you're in a place where you're extremely emotional,
you're like, I just want to get it done. Somebody else to decide you. And when you don't have money set up or set aside, and you have to make major decisions very quickly, and you are in a frame of mind where the virtue of patience is not a thing that you have, and you're just trying to get things done. You can't look at things long term. And so the only option that certain folks have is debt. And whenever you have to rush into debt quickly,
and it's not a calculated decisions where you can run your numbers and make sure it's a return on investment.
You get the most unfavorable circumstances. And so essentially, right, you look at the financial crisis a generation has been put in by taking out student loans when they couldn't think about long term, and how people are hamstrung for 10, 20, 25 years. And you find funerals and things like that can actually do the exact same thing. Because it is an inevitability. It's something that we should all plan for, but it's so unpleasant that nobody wants to talk through it or plan for it. And and you just see like decisions that are made to be able to move people through grief, and people imagine once the funeral is done, I'll have closure. Yeah. But that's again.
No, that's when it starts.
No. Closure is a myth.
Closure is a myth, but that's when actually like your process starts.
The grieving starts there. Yeah, it doesn't end there.
Yeah.
And you just find it's like, no, like grief does remind us that money isn't everything, right? Grief reminds us that there are problems that you have that money can't solve.
Yeah.
But money's not everything, but money's not nothing.
Yes.
And money is not unimportant.
Yeah.
And part of why you want to prepare is not just to be able to buy the stuff that you want, but to ensure that you have the margin to heal. Yeah. Not if things go wrong, when things go wrong.
Money isn't everything, like we mentioned, but money is a tool, and it's a necessary tool to help to be able to reduce the stress that we're already dealing with, to really help like make things easier in a very difficult time. So there's a difference between having money and not having options, and your loved one needs mental health support, and the difference of you going to the local county, what we call it, what's the downtown hospital?
Grady?
Grady.
Okay.
Yeah, we only want to go to Grady unless you get shot, right? Right. Or going to getting your mental health support in a more, Skyline Trail, which is a more, community that looks like Emory, right? Like there's a difference between, underground Atlanta versus Emory Decatur University, right? And so oftentimes we see real estate influencers and investors, and we're talking about the highlights of the things that wealth brings us, like vacations and travel, and all those things are great. Yeah. We do that, but at the end of the day, whenever there's a stressful situation that happens and it requires having financial resources, we want to be able to do that. Like I just recently, we picked up and moved because we wanted to offer better academic situation for our kids. Yeah. Having financial resources allow you to do that. Right. I remember I was in middle school. Middle school was probably the first time that, looking back now, I think I was depressed. And I basically got jumped, which is, a lot of people don't know the old Erica.
Fighter, hands.
I used to use my passion in a lot of different ways, okay guys? And I got jumped, right? And I got beat up and I was embarrassed. And I just remember going to my mom and my dad, and I was like, can I please go to a different school? Can I please go to a different school? And they was like, no, we can't just get up and move. We can't do that. Yeah. And not that I should have been running from my problems, but I think that just being able to have the ability to be able to change up your situation if you need to provide better opportunities for your children. And like the things we talked about, money does provide the opportunity. And real estate is seriously the lowest barrier of entry to be able to build wealth. Yeah.
This is in 2019. I had some time off, margin. Yeah. My daughter's 2 years old at the time. I've got some extended time off from my work as a pastor. Yeah. And this is one of the first sabbaticals that I had where I didn't have any deadlines. I didn't have to speak. I didn't have to write. So I just spent extended time with my 2-year-old daughter. And I realized that it was like generations past, they just had to work to make ends meet, right? So they had to work. And their aim was, hey, I want to free you up so that the work that you do, you can work in your purpose, calling, and you can have the job of your dreams. Yeah. Which is great. And then I think, but past that, there is I've done what I felt called to do for all of these years. And there was an aspect I remember just being able to sit there and say, no, I think I actually want to take this thing a step further. I don't just want to have the job of my dreams. I want to create a life, right? To create the kind of life where I can spend extended time with my wife and my daughter, and you do start to find out that it's like the nice thing, like that's life is not in those nice things, right? Like, you know, everybody with money finds themselves facing problems that money can't solve. There is a quality of life that goes deeper than just things. And I think, you know, what I love about what you do and what I love about our friendship is that those things are the subject of focus, because those are the things where it's like when life hits rock bottom. Those are the things that you're like, yo, I would trade it all for more time with them. I would trade it all for this. And I think I see you laboring to help people create the kind of life that when we do find ourselves at that space, there is sadness, but there's not regret.
Yes. No, that's so good. That's really good. And that actually helps me to process the grief that I did have with my dad, even though I feel like I would have wanted to have him longer, of course. But thinking about, man, I was talking to my friend about how like my dad was such a better grandparent than he was a dad. And so seeing that being able to go on vacations and spend the time together, and those are the moments that really, really matter the most. And so I'm just really passionate about, I don't want people to get stuck in this rat race of like constantly working, hustling. And then they look up and they have a heart attack or somebody's gone, you know, like I really, that's literally the DNA of owning it and living it. We want you to do it at the same time. And I'm super passionate about helping people do that in a really tangible way. So I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to end this episode giving people really tangible things that they can like take away from this conversation and start doing immediately. I want you to talk about some ways that they can actually begin really processing their grief. And then I'm going to talk to them about a couple steps on how they can actually get to a place of being able to begin today having financial options that support them. One other thing I think is important to like paint the picture of. So for me, real estate has helped to provide space to grief in a couple different ways. Monthly income, legit, like, like, oh, I need to process this really hard thing that happened. I need to take time off and make sure bills and things are paid without requiring my labor. Also, you know, maybe this house isn't as profitable as I would have wanted it to be, but I have a bunch of equity. So I can sell this house. I can then use some of that money to live off of. So then I can also process these things. I can invest in counseling, whatever those things. Like real estate can tangibly work for you how it needs to work for you in that season, right? So I wanted to mention that. So before I go into like tangible ways they can get started today, like what are tangible ways they can begin the beginning of their grief process if they have not dealt with it today?
You know, one of the things with grief is, and this comes from a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, Francis Waller. And one of the things that he talks through is he's like, all right, grief, don't think of grief as a journey, think of it as like gates. And so he has these 5 gates. With gates, you can go in and out and be at the same spot. So there is not, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then you're done. He's like, the first gate that you pass through with grief is an entrance into an ongoing conversation. And the words, the opening lines of the conversation of grief is this. Everything in this world that you love, you'll lose one day. And that's not meant to make you sad, right? It's meant to make you sober. Grief is not meant to make you a worse version of yourself.
Yeah.
Grief is meant to make you a better, more present version of yourself,
That's
right?
good. That's
That
good.
every time you're on a couch sitting next to your daughter,
Yeah.
and your nose is like buried in your phone, grief slithers up your spine and taps you on the shoulder and says, everything in this world that you love, you'll lose.
Wow.
You're not gonna be with her forever. So instead of your nose being buried in your phone, nestle your nose in your daughter. Make the most of your time. As you start to make the most of your time there, you start to find out this, grief is not something for me to be afraid of. Grief is not something for me to run away from. It's something for me to lean into. The way that people need to process their grief is, it's like this, right? There's an indirect way for people to process grief. So I'll be 40 this summer.
Yeah.
34, around then I was playing ball with some folks and I hurt my back. And it was hurt for so long. I go to the doctor, and this is after months of massages and treatments and ice packs. And I sit there and the doctor walks in and she spends all of her time on my hamstring and knees. And I say, no, wait. It's my back that hurt. And she said, no. Your back is where you feel the symptoms. The source of the problem is your hamstring and your knees. You have weak hamstrings. Strengthen your hamstrings and your back will feel better. Wow. And I did, and it worked.
Wow.
One of the things with grief is like, we just live in a world where we are impatient with grief.
Yeah.
The US Bureau of Labor and Statistics says, you'll love this, the average full-time employee gets 3 bereavement days per year.
Wow.
So if you lose your mother on a Monday, your work says, well, take all the time that you need. Just make sure that you're back by Friday.
That's crazy.
Our world is impatient. We want to move past our grief. The best way to process your grief is to work on the hamstring of patience, cultivating that virtue.
Yeah.
And the way you cultivate virtues is through telling stories.
Yeah.
On the drive over today, I thought about, my daughter was born 2 years after my brother died. And with all the work and stuff that I've done on grief, she's heard me talk a whole lot about the fact that he died and his death. She hasn't heard me talk as much about his life. So now I'm trying to tell her a story. Hey, this is what Sam was. And the more that I start to rehearse and tell those things, the more I realize how much I've been changed, right? I'm a hard worker because Sam was one of the first ones that was like, yo, if you want to get this, you can get it. Yeah. You've just got to work. And I'm like, work?
Yeah.
All right. And I did it and it worked, right?
Yes.
Sam was right?
Sam was a big reason why I thought about investing. I started investing.
Oh, I remember. Sam was in college.
Yes.
He was investing in mobile homes.
He was the first real estate investor out of all of us.
He would have been a mogul.
We would have been working together.
Oh, yeah.
Hands down, we would have been working together.
Yeah. So, those are the things, right? So it's like this, right? And this just puts a different spin on the right. This is the sweetness. I mean, we've said it all the time. Most people avoid processing their grief for the same reason they avoid drinking coffee black, because they know coffee's bitter and they dislike it. So they load it up with all types of stuff. And they think that if they don't taste the bitterness of the coffee that they won, but what they miss out on is no, coffee is not a bean. Coffee is a fruit, and the fruit takes on the flavor of its soil. So if you drink it black, right, there's sweetnesses that are on the back end, but they're only found if you lean into the bitterness. Then you'll be able to notice the subtle sweetnesses on back. Grief is the same way.
Yeah.
We spend so much time trying to buy our way out of grief, achieve our way out of grief. And we numb ourselves to the bitterness of grief. We don't want to think about the loss, but if we lean in and start to talk and share stories, we can find that, the tears may come down, but the smiles come up, and they remind us that though the person is gone, our relationship with them hasn't ended. It's changed because we're still presently affected by what they did.
And that's also, you just described like a picture of what I think healing sounds like too. Like healing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. I don't even want to even say my little things after that. Like, what? That is amazing. That's beautiful. I would just say, from if you're here, and so many things you touched on, even, man, I know I was convicted by the phone and not being present. And so many people are here, whether they have the tangible grief or the intangible grief, and they want to actually start working towards it.
Yeah.
And for some of you, real estate investing may be the tool that you use in order to help you do that.
Yeah.
And the good thing is, I love that what we did was my website, owningandlivingit.com, we put together a bunch of free resources because we get that people are starting in different places. And so I have a workshop that's basically, it says, if I started over today, here's exactly what I would do. That's free for you.
Right.
So I would suggest going to that website, getting started, and just beginning to say, okay, what does this look like? Be wrapping my mind around beginning to use real estate as this tool to be able to help me get more margin so I can process grief, so I can build wealth. I would say that is your best next step because it doesn't cost you anything, and you get started. And John is also an investor.
Oh yeah, too. But one of the greatest gifts, and I just wanted to be sure that I do think one of the greatest gifts that you haven't talked about, and it's good that you haven't talked about it because it would be like you big up in yourself, right? That real estate and wealth does give is it gives you the gift of the option of generosity.
Yes.
And I feel like it's there's a unique, I look back at the time when we did As We Grieved, and I remember the way that just people in our lives, from the, all our rich friends, right? From you to, the Craze, the Darren Lee's, just all these people who had it. Yeah. And you start to find that there is a unique joy that comes from generosity that you do not get from acquisition.
No.
And I do think that, just the ability to be generous in a very rich way is something that a lot of people sleep on, that is the source of a lot of joy that a lot of people leave on the table. 1000%. Yeah.
I love that. I love to be able to give and not have to think about it.
Right.
Because sometimes you give, you be like, ooh, am I gonna get that back? No, I love to be able to give and not have to think about it. And because we've all been the recipient of lots of gifts.
Absolutely.
So I love this. Thanks so much for coming.
Oh my
so good. Such a rich conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, where can the people find you, connect with you, and what do you have coming up that people can take advantage of?
All right, there's a few things. My website, johno.co, John spelled the right way, Johno. IG, you can find me there. We go on tour. So each year we do these set of immersive experience that will probably be the most pleasant experience that anybody has with grief. Yeah, you can check that out. The last book that I wrote is called We Go On, Finding Purpose in All of Life's Joys and Sorrows. And it is a book that's about grief and hope. Most people think grief and hope are parallel streets, that they have to choose one, but that is not the case. Grief and hope intersect. It's possible to be at the corner of both. And, don't get it on Kindle, get it on a hardback. I crafted it right. The book is a hardback because it's grief is heavy and I wanted people to feel it. The inside of it is beautiful, right? Because
Yeah.
grief is confusing and people don't think of beauty when they think of grief. And
Yes.
I'm working on another book right now. Do
Yeah.
I say that?
Go ahead.
Okay. It's called Grief is a Language, Finding the Right Words When There Are None. So you're going to have to wait some time for that. But,
Follow John.
Yeah.
This is exclusive, y'all. I got some exclusive
Come on.
updates here. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here.
thank you, Erica.
Awesome.
All right.